I want to start this by saying something that might sound strange. I don't think we're living through a collapse, and I also don't think things are fine. What it feels like, at least to me, is that we're living through a period where nothing ever really gets resolved anymore. Problems don't end, they don't clear, they don't reset, they just get managed. Inflation gets managed, interest rates get managed, debt gets managed, conflicts get managed. Everything is contained, adjusted, delayed, but very little feels finished. And once you notice that pattern, it's hard to unsee it. You can follow the news closely. You can understand individual stories. And yet, when you zoom out, it still doesn't quite explain how things feel. It doesn't feel like panic. It doesn't feel like growth. It doesn't even really feel like crisis. It feels like we're in between something, like the system is holding itself together, but only just enough to keep going. In the last few years, we've all been given lots of explanations. Inflation happened because of supply chains. Rates went up to fix it. Then they paused. Now maybe they come down. Markets rally, markets sell off. Markets do both at the same time. And every explanation makes sense on its own. But taken together, they don't quite add up. Because nothing ever seems to actually finish. If you're new here, I'm Paula. On this channel, I spend a lot of time trying to understand what's going on underneath markets, underneath money, and underneath headlines. Not to predict anything and not to hype anything, but to understand how the world is actually working right now. And this video is the start of a series where I want to slow that right down. Not to give answers, but to try and understand the environment we're all operating inside. Because I think a lot of stress people feel right now comes from trying to make sense of this world using rules that don't quite apply anymore. Let me explain what I mean. For a long time, the story was relatively simple. If the economy slowed, central banks cut rates. If inflation rose, they raised them. If something broke, liquidity came in and reset the system. And most of the time, that worked. There were cycles, there was recessions, there were recoveries. Things cleared. What feels different now is that nothing really clears anymore. Rates go up, but they can't go too far. Rates come down, but they can't go too far either. Debt doesn't get paid off, it gets rolled. Problems don't disappear, they get shifted. There's a simple way to see how different this is from the past. If you think back to something like 2008, the response was brutal, but it was clear. Banks failed, rates were slashed, the system was reset. It was painful, but it was decisive. What we've done since then is very different. We didn't clear the debt, we absorbed it. We didn't reset the system, we stabilised it. We didn't let things break, we made them manageable. And that choice made sense at the time. But it also changed how the system behaves going forward. Because once you choose stability over resolution, you don't get clean endings anymore. You get ongoing management. And the longer this goes on, the more noticeable it becomes. You can see it in policy. Every decision feels cautious. Every statement is carefully worded. Every move is framed as data dependent. Not because people don't know what they're doing, but because every lever that still exists comes with a cost attached to it. Pull too hard and something snaps somewhere else. So instead, everything gets balanced, managed. You can see it in markets too. Markets don't behave the way people expect them to anymore. Bad news doesn't always crash things. Good news doesn't always lift things. Sometimes markets move before the explanation shows up, and then the explanation arrives afterwards as if it was always obvious. It can feel manipulative if you don't understand what's going on, but often it's not manipulation, it's adaptation. I think part of the problem is that we still talk about the economy as if we're in a world driven mainly by growth. Growth up, growth down, expansion or recession. But that framing doesn't really capture what's happening now, because a lot of decisions today aren't being driven by ambition, they're being driven by limits. How far rates can go without breaking something. How much debt can be carried without destabilising risk. How much volatility the system can tolerate. That's a very different environment to grow up in. And money sits right in the centre of this. Because money today doesn't work the way most people think it does. We're often taught that money is collected, saved, and spent like a household. But in reality, most money in the modern system is created through debt. When banks lend, they create money. When governments spend, they issue debt and manage it over time. This isn't hidden. It is not controversial. It's just not talked about very clearly. And for a long time, it wasn't a problem because growth made it manageable. But when growth slows, debt starts to change behaviour. Not immediately, not dramatically, gradually. Once debt reaches a certain scale, choices narrow. Every decision starts to carry consequences elsewhere. Raise rates too much and debt servicing becomes painful very quickly. Cut too quickly and inflation or asset bubbles return. Do nothing and pressure builds anyway. So instead of resolution, we get balance. Instead of reset, we get management. This is why many decisions today feel unsatisfying. It's not because people don't care. It's not because nobody's in control. It's because the system has less room to move than it used to. And when systems stop expanding, they don't collapse straight away. They adapt to their limits. This is also where money starts to feel more political. When choices narrow, power shifts. Who gets support matters more. Who gets cut off matters more. Payment systems matter more. Access matters more. Money stops being neutral, not in an ideological sense, but in a practical one. And once that happens, everything from sanctions to regulation to digital money starts to make a lot more sense. Not as trends, but as responses. If all this sounds heavy, I don't think it needs to be. Understanding this doesn't mean something bad is about to happen. If anything, it explains why things haven't fallen apart. The system isn't weak, it's constrained. And constrained systems behave very differently to collapsing ones. They stabilise, they adapt, they trade off, they don't sprint forward, and they don't fall over easily either. They manage it. I think this is the piece that's missing from a lot of conversations. People think we're waiting for something dramatic, a crash, a reset, a clear turning point. But what if that's not the phase we're in? What if we're in a phase where the most important changes happen quietly, through behaviour, incentives, and structure, rather than through events? That's what this series is really about. Not predicting what happens next, but understanding the rules of the environment we're living in now. Because once you understand those rules, a lot of the confusion starts to fade. Markets make more sense. Policy makes more sense. Even the constant feeling of uncertainty starts to feel more manageable. Not because it goes away, but because it has shape. In the next episode, we're going to go a level deeper. We're going to look at what happens when money and debt collide with geopolitics, and why money stopped being neutral in the first place. Before I finish, I just wanted to say one thing. If this way of thinking resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed. This series is built to be watched over time, and each episode adds another layer of context. And if you found this useful, a like genuinely helps more people find content like this. Content that isn't built for shock or outrage. Now, understanding the world is one thing, knowing how to operate inside it is another. That's why, along with this series, we've put together a completely free course called the Crypto Liftoff course. This is where we break down the exact framework and strategies we use to trade in both the bull markets and the bear markets, without chasing headlines or emotion. The link is in the description below. And finally, if you ever feel like you're trying to make sense of all this on your own, that's exactly why we built the Crypto Wolf Pack. It's a community where people can talk through markets, macro, and charts together, share ideas, and not feel isolated while doing it. Right, guys, take your time with this one. Thank you so much for watching. The next episode will be uploaded tomorrow, so I'll see you in the next one.